All right, let's talk about a band you've probably never heard of, but whose music you have absolutely felt. This is the incredible story of New, a German duo that barely sold any records but ended up completely rewriting the rules for modern rock, punk, and electronic music. They are, and this is no exaggeration, your favorite band's favorite band.
And I'm not just throwing that phrase around. We're talking about titans of music here. David Bowie, Iggy Pop, Joy Division, Radiohead, Sonic Youth. The list just goes on and on. These are musical giants, and they all point back to these two guys from Dusseldorf as a fundamental influence on their sound.
So here's the big question, right? How on earth does that happen? How does a band with almost zero commercial success, I mean, their first album sold a measly 30,000 copies, become one of the most important, most influential acts of the entire 20th century? Well, that's the mystery we're going to unravel today.
Okay, so our story kicks off in 1971, deep in the industrial heart of West Germany. We've got two musicians who decide they've had enough. They're leaving an early, kind of chaotic version of another legendary band you've definitely heard of, Kraftwerk. They wanted to build something totally different, something new.
And here they are. These are the two guys at the center of it all. On the left, you've got the drummer, Klaus, and on the right, the guitarist, Rother. These are the two brilliant and, as we'll see, often clashing personalities who would go on to create the noise sound.
You see, Dinger and Rother were actually in Kraftwerk together for a short time, but it just wasn't clicking. They had, let's say, a difference of temperament. So they broke away with their producer, the legendary Conny Plank, who was so key to their sound that people often call him the hidden third member. They started their own project, and they called it Neu, which is German for new. It was a name Dinger actually swiped from the world of advertising.
And the very first thing they did together? Well, they went and invented a rhythm that would become the engine for a whole new kind of music.
They created what music critics eventually called the Motorik beat. Now, you got to remember, at this time, rock music was all about American and British blues rhythms. This was the total opposite. It was mechanical, it was hypnotic, and it had zero funk or swing. It was just this simple, steady, pulsating 4/4 rhythm that gives you this feeling of endless forward motion. It's like you're driving down the German Autobahn late at night. It became the absolute signature sound of what the press called Krautrock, that incredible wave of experimental German bands from the 70s.
But here's a great little detail. Klaus himself, he hated the name Motorik. He thought it sounded robotic. He had his own name for his drumming style, the Apache beat. And that tells you everything you need to know about his fiery, artistic personality.
But you know, maybe their most mind-blowing innovation didn't come from some grand artistic vision. Nope, it came from the fact that they were completely broke.
So, picture this. They're working on their second album, New 2, and they hit a massive wall. Their record label refused to give them any more money because the first album hadn't sold well enough. So now they're stuck. They have an album to deliver, but they only have enough recorded music for one side of vinyl record.
So what do? This is where the genius kicks in. Instead of just giving up, they took the single they'd already released and they just started messing with it. They filled the entire B-side of the album by playing that single at different speeds, warping the tape. They even put the record on the turntable off-center to make it sound wobbly and weird. And just like that, totally by accident and out of desperation, they had just invented the remix. You know, this creative friction was a constant for Neu. Dinger and Rother had completely different ideas about where the music should go. And by the time they got to their third album in 1975, that tension, it just exploded.
They just couldn't agree on a single direction for the album. So they did something pretty radical. They literally split the record in half. Side 1 would be Michael Rother's vision, and side 2 would be all Klaus Dinger. It was basically a creative civil war, pressed right onto a piece of vinyl.
And you can hear that divide so clearly, it's like night and day. Rother's side is beautiful, it's ambient and atmospheric, kind of like a continuation of their earlier stuff. But then you flip it over to Dinger's side and it's aggressive, it's raw, it's based on actual songs. It's no wonder so many people now look back at it and say, whoa, that's a direct precursor to punk rock, which would blow up just a year later.
And yeah, unsurprisingly, the band just couldn't survive that kind of split. They broke up right after New 75 came out. And what came next wasn't silence, but decades of really bitter personal feuds and legal battles that actually kept their music officially out of stores for years and years. But here's the crazy part. While the band itself was completely fractured, basically dormant,
Their sound was starting to echo louder and louder all over the world.
Just look at this timeline. It tells the whole story. You've got this brief, brilliant flash of creativity from 72 to 75, then a failed reunion in the 80s, and then basically nothing. For decades. It wasn't until 2001 that their albums were even officially reissued on CD. But by then, their influence had already spread like a virus, mostly through word of mouth and scratchy bootleg tapes.
And if you need any more proof of their impact, just listen to this. After Noise split, Klaus Dinger started a new band called La Dusseldorf, and David Bowie, who was famously soaking up all this amazing German music at the time, heard them and literally called their sound the soundtrack of the 80s. I mean, that's the kind of respect their innovations commanded.
So, we end up right back where we started. The band's name means new. They were obsessed with creating the future. And now, more than 50 years later, their hypnotic rhythms and wild sonic experiments have been absorbed into the DNA of so much music that they sound both totally timeless and somehow still incredibly modern. So, the final question is for you. Go listen to their music. Does it still sound new?